FDA Medical Device Regulation and Introduction. The speaker for today's webinar is Sheila Ramaman, RSC, founder and principal consultant, SJR Associates. During the presentation, for any kind of questions, kindly post your questions in the chat box of your GoToMeeting tool, and the speaker would address those questions during the Q&A session. And now I would like to hand over to the speaker, Sheila Ramaman. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you all for attending this overview or introduction to medical device regulation. So let's get started. Okay, there we go. My keyboard's a little bit funky today. So this slide is just a list of the topics. I always like to start out with a history of FDA device regulation, just so folks know where different concepts came from and when they came into effect. Then we're going to talk about how devices are classified by the US FDA, because device classification drives everything. Then we'll talk about the regulatory requirements for each device class, the different paths to market in very summary form. And last, a question that I always get: when are clinical studies required for medical device submissions? So the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938, or the FD&C Act, was the first piece of FDA regulation that mentioned medical devices, and it only prohibited adulteration and misbranding of devices, which means devices had to be manufactured under good manufacturing practices, and their labeling had to be truthful and accurate. It did not define what a medical device was. It didn't include any mechanism for pre-market review and approval of devices. It wasn't until the Medical Device Amendments of 1976 that all of these things were established: the definition of what a medical device actually is, how to get a device to market. It recognized that some devices were already on the market. These are called pre-amendment devices. It established the mechanism for classifying and reclassifying devices, good manufacturing practices, medical device reporting, and investigational device exemptions. These regulations came about as a result of what FDA perceived to be quackery that was pervasive in the medical device marketplace. There were a lot of new and numerous medical technologies being introduced, and FDA also believed that device manufacturers did not exhibit appropriate control or oversight of their products. In other words, between 1938 and 1976, FDA took a hands-off approach and assumed that medical device manufacturers would follow good manufacturing practices similar to what was already in place for drugs and biologics. And they just sort of waited to see how the market would sort itself out. And so in 1976, they decided that manufacturers were not following good manufacturing practices, reporting problems, all of those kinds of things. So that's where the Medical Device Amendments of 1976 came in. So if you do the math, you see that medical devices have only really been formally regulated by the FDA for approximately the last 40 years. Then there was a whole slew of legislation that followed: the Safe Medical Devices Act of 1990, the Medical Device Amendments of 1992, the Quality System Regulation in 1996, which is found at 21 CFR 820. It harmonized the medical device good manufacturing practices with the ISO standards that were then in effect, 9001, 1994, and 13485, 1996. This is where we first see the concept of design controls. Previously, the Safe Medical Devices Act of 1990 had talked about pre-production quality assurance. That's an acronym PPQA. So the Quality System Regulations in 1996 combined GMP regs with pre-production quality assurance and gave it the title design controls. These became effective, the Quality System Regulation became effective in June of 1997, except for design controls, which became effective in June 1998. There was a one-year phase-in period because FDA considered it to be such a sea change in the way of manufacturing and controlling medical devices for the manufacturer. So if you do the math here, you see that design control and quality system regulations have been in effect for slightly less than 20 years in the medical device industry. Then we had several modernization acts. FDAMA of 1997 that introduced the slew of things that are listed here on this slide. The Medical Device User Fee and Modernization